Ball is in my court to do everything I can to promote the Grand Ole Opry, to keep it going, because somewhere there's a little 12-year-old girl that wants to be here just like I did.
Now, at nearly 90 years old, Jeannie Seely is done playing nice. Beneath decades of standing ovations and rhinestone gowns lies a secret she swore she'd take to her grave, but something changed. A letter resurfaced. A name reappeared. And a woman who once held the Opry together with her bare hands is finally telling the truth about what nearly tore her apart. What happened backstage during a power outage in 1971? Why did she burn one of her own dresses in the parking lot that night? And why, for over 50 years, did the Opry avoid mentioning what she saw in room 6B? The answer haunted her until now. Long before the secret, before room 6B, before the dress went up in flames, Jeannie Seely was just a girl with calloused hands and a voice too big for her Pennsylvania hometown. Her father worked at the local steel mill, her mother sang hymns while scrubbing floors, and there were no music agents or industry contacts, just static-filled country radio and a head full of dreams. At 16, she mailed lyrics to a publishing house in Nashville. She got no reply, but she didn't stop. At 21, she packed a single suitcase and a half-used typewriter and headed south. By the time she reached Tennessee, she was nearly broke but not broken. She took temp jobs, slept in borrowed rooms, wrote at night, and sang in places where nobody clapped. Then one night, at a smoky club on the outskirts of town, a man in the back handed her a card after hearing her sing a song that would soon become "Don't Touch Me." Just like that, her voice was on the radio. The awards came, the money followed, but the respect took longer because Jeannie didn't fit. Not by their standards. She wore short skirts and eyeliner, cracked jokes, and didn't call men sir unless they earned it. Worst of all, she sang like she meant every damn word. Her songs weren't dainty heartbreaks. They were firestorms of desire, guilt, power, and regret. When she first stepped onto the Opry stage, she was warned. No dancing, no deep cleavage, no talking back. She nodded, smiled, and did it all anyway. Behind closed doors, the men running the Opry didn't know what to do with her. She was too talented to cut, but too bold to trust. They tried to box her in, giving her bad time slots, pairing her with acts that didn't respect her, whispering things behind her back loud enough for her to hear. But she kept showing up night after night. When her name was finally added to the official rotation, she became the first woman to regularly host the Grand Ole Opry. People clapped and she smiled, but nobody saw what it cost her behind the curtain, because that same year was the first time she was ever called down to room 6B, and the first time she thought about walking away from it all. She didn't ask to go. You didn't get invited to room 6B. You were summoned. It was early 1971. A storm had knocked out power to half the Opry House. The stage lights flickered, the backup generators kicked in, and the crowd never noticed a thing. But backstage, everything changed. A stagehand handed Jeannie a folded piece of paper. No words, just a room number and a time. Room 6B. She'd never heard of it before. It wasn't on the standard maps or hallway lists. Down past the green rooms, beyond the costume storage, no nameplate, just a brass knob and a faint hum behind the door, like static or breath. She opened it. Inside was one lamp, one chair, one man.
He didn't introduce himself. He didn't need to. He was one of the quiet bosses, the kind of man who never showed up in photos but ran the Opry like it was his personal church. His eyes swept over her, not with interest, but with calculation. Then he asked a question she's never repeated out loud. Her answer didn't matter. His message wasn't a request, it was a warning. 11 minutes later, Jeannie walked out pale and silent. She went straight to the parking lot, slipped out of her blue sequin dress with rhinestone trim, one of her favorites, and set it on fire. Nobody knew why, but a janitor saw the smoke and swore she stood there watching it burn like it was a person. She never wore blue on stage again. After that night, things shifted. Her set lists were shortened, her introductions left out. Rumors spread that she was difficult. One producer pulled her from a Saturday show and replaced her with a male newcomer who forgot half his lines. But she kept coming back, kept hosting, kept smiling. Once, she confronted that same man from room 6B in the hallway. He said only 5 words before walking away, "Careful, sweetheart. You're not untouchable." That night, she began locking her dressing room and writing letters. Some she mailed, most she hid in a box under her bed. They weren't diaries, they weren't songs, and they weren't written for sympathy. They were records, typed on onion skin paper with her old manual typewriter, always dated, always signed. Each one was a snapshot of something she wasn't allowed to say out loud, the glances, the threats, the stage cues that mysteriously changed, the times her mic didn't turn on, the night she walked out to silence while the curtain stayed down on purpose. Jeannie Seely wrote it all down, every slight, every humiliation, every name, and kept those letters in a shoebox under her bed, wrapped in a faded red scarf her mother had give her before she left Pennsylvania. The box was locked, and she never told anyone the combination, not even her husband. She called it her insurance policy. But to her, it wasn't about revenge, it was about proof. Because one of the cruelest tricks the Opry played on its women was making them believe none of it was real. That they were too sensitive. That they took things too personally. That no one else had a problem but them. Jeannie knew better. She'd seen how they treated Dottie West before her death. She'd heard the way they spoke about Patty behind closed doors, that mouthy broad, that little drunk, that problem. She wasn't just writing for herself, she was documenting the pattern. But she never intended for anyone to read the letters. Not until the fire. In 1991, her second home caught fire in the middle of the night. Most of the house was spared, but her bedroom went up fast. Somehow, the shoebox survived. The heat melted the scarf, but the lock held. Inside, every single letter was intact. That night, as she sat on her porch surrounded by ash, she opened the box for the first time in years. What she read didn't feel like her life anymore, it felt like a story someone else had lived. Someone trapped. Erased. Controlled. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just whispered to the wind. I wasn't crazy. That was the night she made a new plan, not to burn the letters, not to hide them, but to wait for the right moment to use them. And as she turned 90, that moment finally came. It was just after sunset when the knock came. Jeannie Seely was in her kitchen, barefoot, brewing her usual evening tea. By then she had stopped expecting visitors, most folks her age were either gone or long retired from calling. But this knock was different, soft, hesitant, almost reverent. Standing at the door was a young woman no older than 30, wide-eyed, nervous, clutching a fall. Dirt to her chest like it might disappear. She introduced herself only by first name and said she was working on a graduate thesis about forgotten women of country music. She had driven 6 hours just. Asked where the girl had found it, and that's when the story unraveled. In a backroom closet at the Opry's archival wing, one not open to the public, this letter had been misfiled inside a stack of stage diagrams. A former employee had tucked it there, likely without permission. Maybe he meant to return it. Maybe he meant to leak it. But there it was, preserved, quietly waiting. The girl had found it while researching floor layouts. She read it 3 times before realizing what it was, copied it, then sealed it back in place. When Jeannie asked why she brought it to her, the girl paused and said, "Because I think they've done this to others, and I think they'll do it again." That night, Jeannie didn't sleep. She opened the old shoebox, reread every letter, and realized the silence she'd protected for 60 years was about to end. There had always been whispers about doors that didn't appear on any blueprint, about tapes that vanished from the sound booth, about Opry members who stepped away after asking the wrong questions. But most of all, there was the hallway, a narrow, windowless stretch that led behind the oldest part of the building. Maintenance called it a service wing. Tour guides skipped it entirely. Insiders knew this was where the real decisions got made, where the men in tailored suits and smoky voices gathered behind closed doors and rewrote careers like pages in a script. Jeannie had walked that hallway only twice in her life. Both times it ended with room 6B. But when the young researcher returned a week later carrying floor plans, records, and a notebook full of hand-drawn maps, she said something Jeannie never expected to hear: room 6B doesn't exist anymore. According to updated architectural documents, the room had been walled off in the late 1990s. No permit, no renovation notes, just a blank space where a door once stood, like it had never been there at all. And yet, it had. Jeannie remembered the rug pattern, the sound of the old radiator, the water stain on the ceiling that looked like a boot print. She wasn't imagining it, but someone wanted everyone else to think she was. That night, she pulled out a photo album and flipped to a picture taken backstage in 1974. In the far left corner, barely visible, was a brass doorknob and a plaque, 6B. She mailed a copy of that photo to the young woman along with a note: "If anything happens to me, you tell them I tried to tell the truth." Because the eraser wasn't just about the room, it was about everything that happened inside it. The deals. The silence. The power imbalance that was never spoken aloud, only understood in glances and locked doors. Jeannie had never considered herself brave. She considered herself smart, careful, alive. But as the Opry continued celebrating its polished legacy, rerunning specials, honoring its gentlemen pioneers, she knew the shine had come at a cost. And somewhere beneath that new drywall and glossy branding, the old secrets were still breathing, waiting. By the time Jeannie Seely reached her late 80s, most of the women who had walked those same halls with her were gone. Some died quietly, others faded into obscurity, and too many left behind nothing but questions. Dottie West's car crash was called a tragedy, but Jeannie remembered the months before: the cancelled shows, the odd phone calls, the way Dottie had started saying things on stage she never used to. Loretta Lynn's strokes and strange final interviews raised eyebrows, too. She once told Jeannie, "They don't want us around when we start talking too much." Then came Naomi Judd, gone under a dark cloud, with whispers swirling about what she'd uncovered in her final months. All of them had stories. All of them had scars. And all of them, at one point, had been asked to just trust the Opry. Jeannie had seen the pattern: women pushed out, rewritten, or reduced. If they aged out, they were forgotten. If they pushed back, they were unstable. If they stayed too long, the industry had ways of tightening the noose without leaving a mark. She remembered when Patsy Cline started questioning management, how quickly she was labeled difficult. And when Skeeter Davis criticized the church's grip on the industry, she was banned from the Opry for a decade. Jeannie never forgot that she still had the letter Skeeter mailed her from Kentucky, scrawled in blue ink: "They're not mad at what I said. They're mad I said it where people could hear." Now, in her quiet little home on the edge of Nashville, Jeannie kept a new kind of list, not just of names, but of patterns. Who vanished when, who stopped getting calls, who retired after one too many unanswered questions. The saddest part was that there was never a proper send-off. No tribute. No curtain call. Just a gentle erasing, as if they'd never been center stage, as if the applause had never happened. And yet, their voices still echoed, in the cracks of the old floorboards, in the smell of the dressing room powder, in Jeannie's memory. That's when she knew the truth couldn't stay locked away any longer. Because if she stayed silent, they'd erase her, too. Jeannie Seely never thought she'd outlive them all. She didn't drink much, never smoked past her 30s, but she never lived cautiously either. She sang hard, loved harder, and kept showing up night after night, even when the standing ovations turned into polite nods, even when her dressing room was moved farther from the main hall, even when the phone stopped ringing after the holidays. She was still here. At 90, she moved a little slower, needed help with the zipper on her stage gowns, but her mind was as sharp as ever. She remembered dates, names, who looked her in the eye and who didn't. And when a new generation of women entered the Opry, young, hopeful, unaware, she watched them with a strange mix of pride and dread, because she knew what the place could do to you. Now she knew she couldn't protect them by staying quiet. So she began to speak, quietly at first, a conversation at a tribute show, a quote in a local interview, hints, memories, warnings. Then came the memoir, quietly self-published, barely promoted, but dangerous all the same. Inside were pieces of the letters, redacted names, footnotes, disguised truths, enough to make people uncomfortable, enough to make a few calls stop coming, enough to get a midnight knock on her door from a former Opry tech who simply said, "I read it and I believe every word." There were no lawsuits, no angry press conferences, just silence, which to Jeannie said more than words ever could. In the months that followed, something strange happened. A new Opry policy passed, protecting on-site performers and staff from undue backstage influence. A few producers quietly stepped down. A handful of young women reached out privately to thank her. And one evening, as she stood in the wings, cane in hand, waiting to go on stage for what might be the last time, a young singer brushed past her, turned, and whispered, "Thank you for not letting them bury you." Jeannie smiled, because she knew now that legacy isn't built on what they let you say, it's built on what you say anyway. The Grand Ole Opry stage has seen it all, rising stars, final performances, standing ovations, and sudden exits, but it has never seen another Jeannie Seely. She didn't leave with a bang. She didn't ask for a tribute. She just stopped showing up one day. No farewell special, no gold watch, just an empty stool and a silence that felt heavier than usual. But something had changed. Her memoir, once overlooked, began circulating quietly among younger artists, copies passed backstage, pages dog-eared and highlighted. A new generation began to ask yet questions, and in hallways long thought to be soundproof, whispers returned. At the heart of it all was Jeannie's final act. She donated the shoebox. Every letter, every name, every date was placed into the hands of a country music archive outside Opry control, sealed for public release unless something happened to her. That was the deal. The minute someone tried to erase her, the lid would come off. The Opry hasn't touched her legacy since. These days, she sits on her porch just outside Nashville. Her bones ache, her voice isn't what it was, but the fire is still in her eyes. When asked in a rare interview what she'd say to the Opry now, she only shrugged and said, "I gave you my best years. You gave me your rules. I outlived them." There are still photos of her hanging in the backstage hall. No one dares take them down. Because the truth is, she's not just a survivor of the Opry's golden age, she's its witness, the keeper of secrets, the woman who refused to be silenced. And no matter how many renovations they do, how many press releases they write, or how many curtain calls they choreograph, there will always be a song echoing in the rafters they can't control, a song written in memory, in pain, in legacy. The one Jeannie Seely never stopped singing, even when no one else dared hum along.